I'm with Marcus Kennedy at IDC in Israel, Haifa. Israel, Marcus, what's your job title at the moment?
I'm the General Manager of the Gaming, Creator, and Esports Segment in the Client Computing Group at Intel Corporation. It's a really long title.
And my notes say Marcus Kennedy, General Manager, Gaming Division.
That's fine.
It doesn't cover a fraction of it. We've been given briefings around Intel 13th Gen and other technologies. We've had some NDA briefings because 13th Gen is still a handful of weeks away.
Yeah.
This is a non-NDA briefing.
Okay.
Kitguru's audience is mainly gamers, but also tech enthusiasts. I made a handful of notes, and I know you're going to go straight off piste. So if I throw over some thoughts as to things of interest, and then you talk about whatever interests you.
I'm best off the cuff. Let's go, Leo.
My number one question is, does Intel have a strategy to deal with Microsoft's investments in games studios and games developers?
Yeah, we do.
Thank you.
Do you want me to tell you what it is? So the strategy for investments in game studios and ISVs is really kind of two things. First, we partner with ISVs. It's a very large diaspora of game developers, right, and creation content developers, application developers that we partner with. The reason why we spend a ton of time and effort partnering with them up front is to optimize their applications, whether it's a game, whether it's content creation, whatever it may be, to work better on our platforms. Really straightforward, right? The more we can work with them, the better it looks, the better the experience for the gamers, creators, tech enthusiasts, whomever that purchase our platforms. That's the first easy answer, right? The second answer, though, I think, which maybe gets to the crux of your question, is some of the game developers are large and are making their own investments in other things. Sometimes they buy each other, sometimes they do all kinds of things. And so part of our strategy is focused on kind of the foundation of what we believe, which is the open ecosystem, right? The open PC ecosystem. And so we believe that the more we can partner with as many of these companies as possible, no matter what kind of consolidation might happen in the industry, the better off we'll all be, because we'll be able to kind of steer those companies into the space where they can do the best for the most people and the most common good, which kind of brings back to the open PC ecosystem. So, for example, there was a recent acquisition, right, that was announced, right?
I was going to say, you're going to have to narrow this down, because I made that original note before Gamescom, and while we're at Gamescom, there are rumors to do with Amazon. Yeah. And we've also got ByteDance. So when
there's been a ton. Well, I mean, they're acquiring each other all the time, right? And so the one that comes, I think, most readily to my mind is Microsoft and Activision Blizzard.
Indeed,
and the reason why that is mainly because Microsoft's a huge partner of ours, long-term partner, right? From back in the Intel days, but also because I'm a huge gamer, and I'm a big Blizzard fanboy, right? And so that particular acquisition got my mind spinning, right? But from an Intel perspective, we've been partnering with Activision Blizzard for a long time, optimizing their games for our platforms, working with their engines, co-engineering for all of those things. We've obviously been partnering with Microsoft, so that acquisition had us thinking, well, what does that mean for what we're doing? But it's, again, back to the strategy, because we've been partnering with them for so long, because we focus on the open PC ecosystem. And when you listen to what Microsoft said when they made the acquisition, that their focus is not on creating more walled gardens, but also lining up with the PC ecosystem, a lot of that was because we had conversation with them and we partnered up to kind of point in the right space. So,
which is, okay, given the console thing, and given exclusives and Halo and such like, when you say we had a conversation, I mean that almost sounds like a fist fight.
Oh no, it's
with
nothing so violent, right? No, when I say partnership, I truly mean partnership. We come to the table, we have conversation, we say, hey, we saw you announce this. We ask intentions, we have the conversations about what they're looking to do, we talk about what we'd like to see. It's really that simple, right? And the good news here is that what Microsoft said publicly is the same thing that they said privately, right? Which isn't necessarily always the case with every company in the world, right? In this case, Microsoft's intentions to try to continue down this path, right? As they say publicly, it's exactly what we would love them to go continue to do, because I believe, again, that the more we can do things in an open PC ecosystem, the better it is for all gamers, and that's where they're going.
Now, when you obviously correctly said you've had very long relationships with Microsoft in particular, going back 20 plus years, obviously, called it 30 years for round money. But
probably closer to 40.
Well, sure, I mean, forever, in our world, forever.
So long.
Most of us would think immediately processors, platforms. Clearly, these days, ARC graphics. Does ARC change the conversation with Microsoft at all, or not in the slightest?
No, I think our conversations with Microsoft, and so a little bit of context here, prior to the job that I have today in gaming, creator, and esports, I was also in our data center group,
yes.
driving cloud in our long-term strategic planning. So I worked with Google, Amazon, Facebook, Tencent, Alibaba, Baidu, Microsoft with Azure. And what I'll tell you is, what I learned there in the data center has flowed through here into the client side, and I know that it was the same when I was in the previous job before that in our Internet of Things group on the edge, where they were doing Microsoft Sphere, right? And the conversation was the same all the way across the board, which is, how do we take the applications and the operating systems that Microsoft is bringing to market and make them bring the best experience and make them deliver the best device experience across any of the compute continuum, right? And so in this case, right, when you ask the question about the GPU, for us at least, any part of the socket, any part of the motherboard, any of the socket, it's the same conversation. What can we do in order to enable the best experiences possible? Whether it's the CPU, the GPU, connectivity, storage, memory, doesn't matter. The conversation doesn't change for us with them. It's all about how do we engage, how do we bring the best experience possible. And there's a lot of optimization points from the hardware through the operating system up through the software stack. Yeah, I mean, when you think PC gaming, I do think Microsoft is one of the first companies that you think about, because the vast majority of PC gaming is done on Windows-based PCs, right? The vast majority of games are developed for PC gamings on Windows-based PCs. And so, for us at least, making sure that we partner closely with Microsoft to make sure that all of those Windows-based games show up great on Windows-based PCs is one of our number one activities.
Now, you've been with Intel for 15 or...
Oh, yeah, 16 years now.
You're
aging me up, Leo.
Well, I only mention it because, frankly, you don't look like you can... But you've a long and storied career.
The camera adds 10 pounds, it's back 10 years.
Right. How many years do you feel comfortable looking ahead where the Wintel platform will continue to be a thing before the possibility of moving away from x86 to RISC V or whatever?
Well, that's a really interesting question, Leo. I think the first thing to think about is, Microsoft is a great partner. They're not our only partner, right? We partner on lots of operating systems, whether it's Google Chrome or Linux, right? Even Mac OS. We partner across the board to make sure that games, but also creation and all those things are all the best on any Intel platform. I've said that over and over again. I've got to keep saying it because I know you're giving me that look. But the reason why I continue to say that is because it's really easy to think about a company like Intel only focusing on the larger partners, and that's not how we operate. In order to really bring about our strategy of and continue down the strategy of open PC ecosystem and delivering the best for gamers no matter what, you've got to partner with everybody, from top to bottom, from big to small, right? And so I'm only reiterating that kind of back to your original point. Now, to your question about Wintel / PC ecosystem / RISC, right, and kind of what that looks like. Well, it's an interesting question because I believe that, again, open PC ecosystem, we have to be able to enable all of the instruction sets, all operating systems, because as we've seen, there's an ever-increasing need, an ever-increasing competition in every part of that stack for ARM-based CPUs, for x86, kind of cloud gaming, where it's just simple streaming directly from any instruction set, just sitting in the cloud instead, right? So at least from my point of view, we still believe that the gaming experience, especially the gaming experience is best on a PC. I truly believe that as a gamer who plays across multiple devices, right, on consoles, on PCs, and on my phone, that gaming is best on a PC, and then that PC gaming is still then best on Intel, and it will still require ever-increasing compute. And I don't think that you get what you need in order to drive those great experiences that game developers want to go drive with anything less than x86 architecture with high-end discrete graphics card on a PC platform. I've seen what those other games look like today. It's just not there yet. Maybe it'll get there in the future. Not yet.
I'm hazarding a guess that you own every console in the history of the universe, and then some.
The only one I didn't buy was the Atari Jaguar. I was actually talking with with a couple of folks at lunch the other day about this, and the only reason that I did that was because the controller was just so big and unwieldy. It just didn't look like something I wanted to purchase. Every other console, though, I have bought.
So a man with deep and broad experience too.
Deep and broad experience.
The streaming services, Stadia and such like, as a general thing, is it something that's got potential if you can increase speed blistering fast and drop latency to near zero and you're in a metropolitan area or some such? Is it one of those, it can be tweaked and made great, or is it problematic?
That was a lot of ifs, Leo.
The trouble is the number of times we've been told it's the next great, it's like this technology is always 5 or 10 years away and you're told this is going to be absolutely and it's...
Well, let me answer that two ways. First, cloud gaming, again, kind of going back to what I was talking about, my previous job was in cloud, so I've had the opportunity to see kind of the advent. But cloud gaming's been around for decades, right? With online, like it's been around for a while. The problems have always been the same. For interactive games, right, for interactive applications like games, latency is going to be your number one problem. After latency, bandwidth. Right? And as games continue to follow kind of the path that Moore's Law is on, which, as we know, Moore's Law isn't dead, and so we continue to grow the compute, right? Because of that, right, that just leads to cloud gaming needing bigger and bigger bandwidth, bigger and bigger pipes to render if you're going to stream nothing but your game content, right? And that's how you're going to consume. Well, that's just really costly. And so now you've got your third problem, which is the cost of streaming 4K quality content directly to games that already have a latency penalty when you're trying to play. So I think cloud gaming has a few of these barriers to overcome before it can really be viable the way that local gaming really is. That said, we do know that cloud gaming, I think probably now more than ever, is kind of crossing the hump of being commercially viable and into an actual thing that's sticking around. Our projections show that cloud gaming is not going to be any more than roughly 5 to 7% of the market in the next 5-ish years, right? So it's still a very small chunk. That's still a large business because PC gaming is really big, right? Bigger than Hollywood. Yeah, it's still really big, but it's a really small part of the business. And so PC gaming even overall, including cell phone gaming, is still going to be the way to play beyond cloud gaming.
And are you thinking there, we're in a cafeteria.
We're in a cafeteria.
And someone's clearing up. Hard surfaces, lots of hard surfaces.
Gotta love live.
In this context, are you thinking sitting on your couch with the games controller, casting it to the TV kind of streaming, or are you talking about on the train with another, which or to you is all the same thing?
It's not all the same thing. It's a really good question. So when I say cloud gaming being up to 5% of the market, what I'm talking about specifically is games that are rendered in a cloud somewhere that you then stream and you play through that stream, full stop. Right? I'm not talking about anything that's rendered and then sent, but you're still playing locally or something therein. We actually see there are some usages where you've got like a really beefy desktop, right? And you're actually streaming in home. It's not being streamed from a data center somewhere. That solves your latency problem. It also solves some portion of your cost problem, right? And so that there is actually benefit there. But if you heard what I said some beefy desktop, right?
It helps if you got a 13900.
It helps if you got a 13900K for a few reasons. One, because you can do that streaming and broadcasting while you're gaming, but also because that beefy processor allows you to then do all of that compute locally, and then stream to your device that you're sitting there on your couch trying to play, or your TV or wherever. We do see an increase in that usage model. That's not what I mean when I say cloud gaming, though. That's just in-home streaming, and has actually also been usage for a while too.
And the context actually streaming. it seems to me that when there's been talk of multitasking, one of the tasks that comes up again, I say task is stretching it, is playing a game whilst also Twitch or whichever.
Which my 7-year-old does today. She's crazy.
So this, I mean, what do we call this? Do we call this a trend, a boom industry, life? It's this thing. I mean, how many TV stations are there in South Korea or internet channels in South Korea that are just that and nothing else?
Not my area of expertise on that one, Leo, but I'd venture to say that there's going to be way more people streaming than there are TV stations in South Korea over time.
A fair point, well made. And I don't know where I'm going with that thought. It's just such an alien thing to me. The idea of playing while streaming. I mean, personally, I'm more of a Far Cry kind of person. A sneak up very slowly and then snipe in the head.
Far Cry's a good game.
The 200 frames a second whilst and with an audience is just humiliation for me.
You know, maybe the hypothesis here is, or the question is this really something that people are going to be buying computers thinking about? Is it a usage model that they're doing, and is it growing in that way versus
I like it.
That we know the gaming
That's the
is?
question.
Is that where you're going?
That's the question I'm meant to ask. Thank you.
So I think the answer is yes. And the reason that, and part of the reason why we as a company and why me and the job that I'm in right now focuses so heavily on providing flexibility, providing users the platforms that give you the flexibility to do whatever you want. If you want a game, an only game, well, we give you the world's best gaming experience. If you want a game while you're streaming, we do that too. If you want a game on a budget, right, we do that too. If you want a game on a budget while you're without upgrading to DDR5, you want to have a budget CPU with your previous generation GPU, and you want to do DDR4, we've got you covered. That flexibility is something that honestly we don't talk about enough. It's part of the reason why I'm talking about it here, because I think it gives users the ability to do whatever they want. Coming back to the question that you asked that I just paraphrased for you.
That you rephrased so much better with sense.
Coming back to that question, because we believe that is a trend, that there will be more and more simultaneous usages. Gamers don't just game, creators don't just create. More people will need their computers to do more things, right? We think that offering more and more flexibility at a platform level and at a system level is going to be critical to delivering the experiences that gamers and creators or whomever enthusiasts want.
One of the questions I wrote down weeks ago, which has kind of slightly evolved in my mind. The question I originally wrote was, does software such as Asus Armoury Crate, Corsair iQ, MSI Center, and insert any other brands, impact the power saving technologies that Intel has developed? But the question in my mind has evolved. We'll come back to that, which is when we walked around the labs earlier, which was a no cameras, no video, no nothing.
You're welcome.
Deep, very good tour. Was when you're seeing how many tens of thousands of CPUs and how many workstations, no RGB. There wasn't an LED in sight because it's all reference.
There were a couple. We had a couple kind of on the side.
But it just kind of brings home the thing, which is the people who are developing bug fixing and such like, they're not having to fight in that. They're doing with an awful lot of things, but not that thing.
So let me address this. Well, let me let you finish your question.
No. Take it away.
So first, the labs that we walked you through were our validation labs. So what you saw being tested were the CPU and at a system level game performance, right? And we're doing competitive performance back there too. It wasn't just our chips that you saw. It was other chips too, right? And that's because we want to do all kinds of testing. We want to see how games perform with many different configurations. And so it was a ton of different builds, right? So all validation, from functional validation all the way through game performance. So people aren't actually gaming back there, right? They're just testing the
very
CPU.
few people, lots of workstations,
exactly. So
and
they're
robots.
just testing the functional and how it actually operates. Where we get into adding the rest of the stack on there, and this is because each customer, each OEM actually has a very different looking software stack, from Asus that you mentioned to Dell to Acer, whomever, pick one, right? They all look very different internally, which means validation looks very different. And so when you multiply that by the number of configurations, it's infinite of configurations to try to go test.
Yes.
And so we don't do that testing. We do very little of that testing in our labs. Where we do those typically is actually at the customer. We do have some customer validation labs internally, just not here in Israel. We have them in places like Oregon and Arizona. But a lot of those we actually do with co-engineers, people we sit at our customers' labs to do those kinds of validation and testing there. That way, if we find something, then we're with the people who can help fix it, right? And so, again, back to the partnerships that we do, we partner with the...
So at Corsair HQ, wherever that is in California, there's an Intel guy likely to be there, or
I can't
visiting.
Speak for Corsair specifically, for Origin, which is when they bought those guys. But yes, we have engineers that actually go. We have field service engineers that go to those locations to actually go and help debug all of these things when we find them. We do some centralized things, some testing, but when it comes to the specific customer software stacks, a lot of times it's people in the field at the customer where those software stacks are actually being developed. Makes it easier to do it when you have that level of partnership down to the level of detail that we need to get to.
And the first part of that rude question you answered in one word, which is, and do those various applications, as Intel,
like Armory Crate.
Yeah, well, quite. As Intel has long said, it's very difficult to do nothing when you're attempting to get the thing to sleep constantly.
That's exactly
and this
right.
is constantly waking it.
That's exactly right.
So if it feels to me like a battle is constantly going on, is
Always.
that right?
It is a constant battle. That's right. And the last thing I'd say is, we have gamers doing our gamer testing too. So even though they're not gaming there, when they go home, they definitely have RGB at their houses, myself included.
I think we're done. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It was my pleasure.
Fist bump.
Fist bump.